Well, me and this movie have one thing in common, that we both wish we kept that goddamn door closed. Alright, back again. So this is a movie I have to keep reminding myself that I saw, which was the new Insidious movie, the Red Door, which is, I guess, for some reason, they just couldn't, like, they're just not a horror franchise they can let go for some reason. I know this is directed by Patrick Wilson, so I don't know what his personal investment is in this franchise. I guess maybe he just I don't know if he, like, is genuinely super passionate about this franchise, or if it's just like he doesn't want to let go of an easy meal ticket. Either way, I can't necessarily blame him, because, like, hey, I get it. A franchise is a franchise, and he's kind of made a lot of his money recently on the Insidious films and the Conjuring films. So that just seems like his bread and butter, and that's where he's comfortable doing. I guess he just really want to bring anyone back, do one more. I guess maybe to finish off the story, or maybe to make a quick buck. Again, I don't know. I don't want to assume intention, because of the people in this film, it does feel like Patrick Wilson cares the most about this, and is trying the hardest, God bless him, out of this. Now, the Insidious movies are one of those things I do not remember any of them. That's really what it boils down to. I remember bits and pieces, and I've seen most of them. I think I've seen like two through four, and you put a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you what happens in any of them. And that's not a great signifier for your horror franchise. I guess one thing me and Patrick Wilson do agree on is we also don't remember the previous Insidious films. Now, that being said, I get what this movie was going for. I get the point it was trying to make. I get the intention behind it. And it's not a bad idea. So for those who don't remember anything about these films, Insidious, this Insidious anyway, takes place after the last one that Patrick Wilson was in which case he and his son had his memory wiped of their time into the further, which is their like way of saying spooky ghost world, because them knowing about the further creates a psychic connection to the real world where the ghosts can kind of make their way through. So forgetting it was deemed the only way to keep the peace, basically. But now, many years later, Patrick Wilson's not doing so good because he has memory issues and is made him be a bad father to his son, who has grown up to resent him and hate him, and wants to get away from him as fast as possible. Patrick Wilson drives him to college in time to reconnect. It doesn't go well. He kind of nags his son a little bit. He does a lot of like little microaggressions. I don't want to say microaggressions. I don't think it's the right terminology. But he just kind of just picks at him in little tiny ways. Just little subtle jabs, little subtle things here that just you can tell like really just irk a kid to no end. And what leads to a blowout argument between the two, and then both of them start realizing independently that they still have a connection to the further, even though neither of them will remember what it is. So they both start putting the pieces together about their past and the year that they forgot, which of course opens the door, literally and figuratively, for more ghosts to enter our world. That's the basic premise. And I get, because I guess his son is an artist, so the more he paints about his trauma and his past, the more it kind of starts manifesting the real world. So I get what it was trying to do. It was trying to be a commentary on repressed emotions based on traumatic pasts and how that could impact relationships in the short and long term, especially parental relationships. And how about confronting those traumatic pasts and that those repressed memories can lead to a better, a better future, more healing and more growth as people. On paper, it's a good idea. On paper, it's a concept that should work. There's a bit more depth to it than just a scary, spooky ghost story. Unfortunately, the execution doesn't really pay off in this in the way that it should have. For one thing, it does kind of pass the buck off to he was possessed by ghosts as the reason for his trauma, as opposed to the father actually taking full accountability. And that's not to say, like, obviously he was possessed. It wasn't his, like, Patrick Wilson's fault necessarily. But there are, like, you could definitely tell there's a pattern of behavior outside of that between him and his son that has caused a lot of the tension between them. Just subtle jabs, subtle, like, oh, you should be grateful that you have me kind of shit that a lot of parents tend to do. And I get the temptation from the parental side. I'm not completely throwing parents under the bus. I understand to a degree. Kind of like the mentality that goes into it. But I also know the other side where it's super fucking unhelpful. And just does not make you close to your child. So, for example, very early on, when Patrick Wilson's driving his son to, it's like art school, basically, or a college where he's going to be studying art. At some point he says, like, he looks over his son who's doing some drawings, and he's like, hey, these are really good. And then which is like, hey, that's a good comment for a father to give. Acknowledge your son's interest, validate their skills in it, and like talk about their passions. But then he throws in a jab like, it better be for the amount of money we pay. Like that kind of shit. That kind of just, those little jabs. And he does quite a few of those. Even kind of going so far as like, you are so ungrateful, which just is just. That pisses me off. And I can tell it's intentional. If it leaned more into that, again, there would be more meat to the story. And to his credit, he does eventually apologize. But first off, he kind of has this, like, after they have their blowout argument, because he just pushes things too far, he does go on the phone and is like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm going to figure out what's wrong with me, and I'm going to keep you in the loop, and I love you. And I'm kind of like, that's not the problem, dude. The problem is you were being an asshole, and you should, like, acknowledge that and take accountability for it. That's how you heal shit, not go like, well, I'm just gonna figure out this is a problem I can solve, so I'm gonna solve it like a man. And it's like, no, it's not the issue. But again, if that one's been more personal to me, I'll acknowledge right off the bat. But it kind of glances over all that and focuses more on just the spooky ghost stuff, which you would expect for a movie this caliber, and that's where it just gets super boring, super generic, relies on jump scares, not particularly visually interesting. The demon from the first one shows up again, but they don't do anything really new with him. They don't expand him in any way. So it really feels like that character is just there to be like, hey, I was in a couple of the other films, so I'm going to be in this one too. Almost a kind of portray like I'm the author of all your pain shit, but that never really leads anywhere, so it just kind of putters out. And what you're left with is just a really bland, uneventful horror movie that just doesn't really feel like it goes anywhere particularly interesting. Now, Patrick Wilson's son has his own sidekick who is aggressively quirky, is the word I would use. Played by Sinclair Daniel, who again is doing her best, and it's not her fault. But the material makes her just aggressively in your face quirky, to the point where it's kind of exhausting, and you're kind of like, girl, you're up here, I need you to take it down to here for like a few fucking minutes. And it's, despite all the quirkiness for now, I only just now remember she's in this movie at all, and that's going to describe a good chunk of the film. Is like, I have to remind myself continuously that I saw it just long enough to record this review, and then as soon as I'm done recording, I'm gonna forget all about it, like I have all the other Insidious movies. And it's just there's nothing to this. There's no meat on the bone. It's not even enough to be angry about. It's just really forgettable. And yeah, I mean, I hope Patrick Wilson got what he wanted out of it. I hope that he got some closure on this franchise, and I hope that we can finally put all this to bed once for all, because I don't want to see another Insidious movie. So, I guess I still have to sit through The Nun 2 at some point, because that's coming out for some reason. The first Nun wasn't particularly good, but we're just gonna milk this for all it's worth. But it's franchise horror, one way I expect. I don't know. Yeah, Insidious to Red Door, it sucks. Next movie. Bye.